What we see is that fossil fuel subsidies are often very expensive for countries to put in place. They're expensive to governments, to taxpayers, to consumers. They also lead to increased greenhouse gas emissions. Here we are at COP15 and we're looking at how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and fossil fuel subsidies are basically a subsidy to emitting carbon. What we've done is some analysis together with our sister organization, so OECD together with the IEA, looking at the impacts of phasing out fossil fuel subsidies. And what we found is phasing these out in just 20 countries could lead to reductions in emissions of 10% by 2050 compared to business as usual. One of the difficulties with fossil fuel subsidies is that they're transferred in very different ways. For example, you may get reductions in tax rates, you might get tax exemptions. It's very difficult to measure many fossil fuel subsidies. We have good data on some subsidies, such as consumer subsidies in developing and emerging economies, but very bad data on producer subsidies and subsidies in developed countries. So one of the things we're doing at OECD is trying to develop better data and to develop a methodology for estimating subsidies to both producers and consumers so we can look at what their impacts are and how to phase them out. Well, the critical thing is to start now. In terms of the time frame, we really do need to start now. In terms of the time frame for each country, it's going to vary depending on the types of fossil fuel subsidies that are in place, whether there's good estimates and good understanding of what's there, and the time that it takes to go through the political process of increasing awareness of these subsidies and the cost to the economy, the cost in terms of emissions, and putting in place the right measures to be able to transition to phase out the fossil fuel subsidies.
Well, a year or so ago in the Global Subsidies Initiative, it really felt like a little bit of a lonely task. We were the only people working significantly on fossil fuel subsidy reform. And I think the huge consensus and the huge impulse we've got from the G20's announcement that we should be phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies in all the G20 countries has really given us all a lift. Politically, it's very simple. Subsidies are hugely expensive. They cause a lot of negative effects on emissions, on global warming, on security of supply. It seems obvious to phase them out, but of course, as you well know, the challenge is implementation. And when we start looking at the elements of implementation, it's clear this is going to be a long and painstaking road, but the prize is huge. We must follow that road. We have, the GSI has been around now 4 years, the Global Subsidies Initiative, and we've made an awful lot of contacts in there and become really a trusted partner of the IGOs, of the governments, and they recognise that there are things they can't do on their own, and there are things that they need help with, and that they trust our objectivity to help them with those.
If we were to reduce the subsidies, it will help for globally to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. It is good for everybody. But when it comes to the countries itself, there are many co-benefits. For example, in the energy consuming countries, if you reduce the subsidies for oil, for example, your oil consumption will be less, and the country will need to import less oil, then the oil import bills will go down. So this is a good issue for many energy consuming countries. Plus, there will be less reduction of the emissions of local pollution, such as sulfur dioxide, such as NOx and others, which we can smell and feel in many cities in developing countries. So this is also a very good news. And thirdly, it will also help for the energy security, which is a very important issue for many energy consuming countries. So these are very good news in the case of a subsidy removal in the energy consuming countries. When it comes to the energy producing countries, those countries make a lot of money, legitimately so, when they export their oil outside of their countries. But this export is a function of how much oil they produce and how much of it they use domestically. If they were to introduce a subsidy reform, therefore the prices will go up, and therefore their own consumption will be less, and they will be able to export more oil with the same level of production, and they will be making much more money, which is good news for their economy and for their trade balance. And on top of that, even in those countries, the local pollution, such as the NOx, SO2, will also go down. So it could be a win-win-win for both consuming and producing countries.